Hi there. The Professor Del Re and the Professor Larémont are today guests in the Centro American Studies in Rome. Welcome.
Thank you.
So the first question is, what active solution do the others, you, propose in order to solve the problem long term, taking into consideration the discretion of each specific country, sharing the burden in a fair and equal way, including all countries?
Shall I start?
Please start.
Okay. We offer, let's say, in the title of the book, structural solutions, thinking that, in fact, as you were wisely saying, the issue of migration and refugees is not temporary, but is going to be repeating itself for a long time. Therefore, what is needed is a more accurate perception of what the real problems are, taking into consideration that this is not only a so-called crisis, but it's also an opportunity under many respects, and that it is quite articulate, not just a question of humanitarian affairs, but also an economic and social and cultural issue. And therefore, what is needed is to take into consideration the fact that everybody is involved, not only the local countries in the European Union or in Europe in general, but also the countries of origin and transit, and also the countries where the migrants are forced to stay for a certain period of time, which means that those countries cannot only approach the issue in an instinctive and emotional way, but they have to take into consideration creating opportunities for the migrants to stay and probably also to contribute to the local situation.
Well, this phenomenon of migration is probably one of the four most important phenomena of the 21st century. When thinking about problems of the 21st century, scholars and activists are really interested, for example, in one, inequality of wealth, second, climate change, and third, migration, right? And fourth, just general instability in the world geopolitically. Now, all of these issues are interrelated, and the phenomena that occurred in the first decade of the 20th century is not an epiphenomenon. It's not going to happen once. It's a long-term trend that is manifested not only in the Mediterranean, but also in the Americas and also in Asia. So we're caught in these forces of globalization, and what we're trying to understand as scholars and as citizens is to understand what the short-term solutions are, for example, in Europe with regard to Coast Guard operations or the integration of migrants into society, which then implicates sort of a redefinition of what nationalism and identity are, and then the longer-term solutions of looking towards source countries and finding out what are the reasons why migrants are moving, on not only on a trans-Mediterranean scale, but also on a global scale. So our work, I think, is contributing to a larger body of work that's being engaged by scholars throughout the world, because this is an important 21st century phenomenon.
Okay, thank you. So another question concerning the explosion of media nowadays. So what propaganda do you think do you believe would be effective in instilling cultural values in the European societies that would ease the entrance and adoption of immigrating minorities into European communities?
Well, actually, the word propaganda itself has usually a negative somehow in a connotation. Therefore, I would use campaign, if you want, or approach. Definitely, I was quite impressed by one of the people I interviewed who said, especially a mayor in a little town in the north of Italy, who said, we have always had migrants coming. We have always accommodated them. This is not a new phenomenon for us, but it has become new and negative because of the media campaigns that we are affected by. So I think that the best would be take into consideration the fears of the people. How do we really accommodate? How do we really share our wealth and opportunities in life? And at the same time, give them practical solutions, working on the concept of interest, by saying that in fact there are interests for them to exploit in welcoming the migrants. So probably by changing this perspective and taking into consideration both the need for humanitarian help that is absolutely fundamental, but also not working on solidarity and piety, but working on the fact that this is an opportunity in many terms, and there are opportunities and data. Probably this would change the perspective and the views on this particular phenomenon.
Okay.
Well, I can't really speak from my European perspective because I don't live in Europe, but I can speak from an American perspective. And what we're seeing in America is really a cultural divide in which urban centers are for the most part quite welcoming of migrants. But then in the rural areas, the areas that have not profited from economic development since 2004, there's this fear of migrants. Perhaps the same thing is replicated here in Europe. I don't know whether that's the case or not. Perhaps cities here are more welcoming than migrants than those in rural areas. So it seems to me that the critical issue that we need to address is how urban communities, which are more cosmopolitan and have more cosmopolitan identity, can identify the fears and the needs in rural communities who fear the migrant, at least in the United States, and then understand how, as FDR said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. How do we then transcend that fear so that we can create a new identity that is rooted in sort of a cosmopolitan view that sees the migrant as a benefit rather than a threat? And that's going to be a big challenge, intellectually and politically.
Okay. Thank you, both of you, for your brilliant insights, and let's thank Professor Del Re and Professor Larémont for this interview.
And thank you for the invitation.
For very interesting questions. Thank you.